welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, the further fallout from the Swissleaks scandal. This Wednesday, two top executives from HSBC, the world's second largest bank, facing questions over that long list of names of clients that was leaked that list of a Swiss private bank. The man who leaked it is with us, Hervé Falciani. He is the whistleblower. He's with us from an undisclosed location. Thank you for being back with us. Thanks as well to Craig Kapitas, correspondent at large for Quartz and author of Metal Men. From London, Andy Sylvester of the Taxpayers Alliance, and also joining us from Hastings. He's an anti-corruption campaigner, Nicholas Wilson. By the way, these aren't the first apologies by HSBC that we heard this Wednesday. The bank, for instance, putting out full-page ads to say sorry to customers in two British Sunday papers some 10 days ago. There you see that apology as it was printed in the Mail on Sunday. We're getting reactions on Facebook, and it's true that they're not kind to politicians again. Total garbage. How do you question your boss? Bankers run the UK, not politicians. These people asking the questions are all lackeys and work for the same bankers. It's all smoke and mirrors. That's an important question, Craig Kapitas, because we've seen the Occupy Wall Street movement. We've seen growing discontent over the haves and the have-nots, the gap widening.
No. It's the have-nots and the have-yachts.
And with remarks like this one, saying the politicians are in it with the bankers, we're seeing a rising tide of populism in Europe. You say that this is a recurring thing. People talking about tax harmonization. We need to do it. If something's not done, what's going to happen?
It will continue. You know, in a democracy,
but will there be political consequences?
Look, in a democracy, the people get what they deserve, and they deserve what they get. They could have, if they believed that these individuals running their countries, were a bunch of bumptious morons out for themselves. Well, they could have voted them out many times, but this never has become an issue. I realize for many of your viewers, this is a new story, shock horror, but it's a very old story.
Hervé Falciani, let me ask you, when you fall upon the list, you see some of the names there. We've heard about all the different celebrities, politicians. How much would you say does this list sort of ring true when you heard that comment on Facebook that the politicians are in with the bankers? When you look at that, when you think back to who's on that list,
people never been my focus. I would like to react, explaining clearly that you don't have way, more than tweaking complex rules or laws. We have very simple way to do audit in a new way, in a new ethical way, with NGOs being part of those audits that are today supposed to control what is ongoing. If we have ethical lines that are shared not only by the board of directors but also by NGOs, the same way that they are existing already, it will improve. Concretely, not having big and very tough discussions on what can be tweaked. No, the big change will be kind of more transparency, controlled transparency, with, of course, chosen and skilled NGOs, but with, these independent eyes in those affairs that are ongoing. If we want to give more reputational value to our politicians, they have to support just basic, well-known from long time ago already, just transparency principles.
So you say,
and they are talking about everything else that Sorry.
You're saying you're in the you're in it for to reform the system, not to single out people. HSBC claims you tried to sell the stolen data and even traveled to Beirut to do so. How do you react to those claims?
Well, of course, it's absolutely untrue, and it's a good thing. It's a good example, to reveal what is required just to launch an alert. I'm talking, I'm talking about, whistleblower and ethical hotlines that are supposedly there to protect whistleblowers. I had to go, indeed, to Lebanon to trigger the alert. And without this, no investigation in Europe would have been possible. But of course, as I started with, this is usual. They don't want to take the responsibilities. They don't want just to respond to what we are now, not me, not myself only, presenting in front of everyone.
And do you feel as though the British have been particularly slow? We see there have been many more prosecutions here in France or in Belgium.
But it's really complex for Great Britain to address that issue because it's cultural, it's not known, it's unknown until now. We needed first to do everything else to have public awareness. And this is fundamental. And that's why I'm keep insisting on ethical whistleblower hotlines. Not the way they exist today, but, an improved way, an improved one. And this is enough. I mean, nothing to add. No? Just with that, we will have a real change.
Nicholas Wilson, is the public awareness there? Are you heartened by what you heard today in the Commons? Do you feel as though this is a turning point?
Well, I was absolutely shocked, actually, because I'm a whistleblower, and I thought it was unbelievable that they referred to Hervé, they referred to data theft. I mean, it's shooting the messenger. They've been caught with their fingers in the till, and they're blaming the manufacturer of the till or something. It's just ridiculous. But I think the problem, the general problem, I describe myself as an anti-corruption campaigner, and I think the problem isn't tax specifically, it's the whole culture of the revolving doors. There was a guy, there was a head of the HMRC in the UK, David Hartnett, who did a sweetheart deal with HSBC and then left HMRC and had a plum job at HSBC. It's widely believed that the MI5 in the UK protected Stephen Green from being arrested in America over the money laundering scandal, the Mexican money laundering.
The former boss of HSBC.
Yes, it's Stephen Green. Last year, the head of MI5, Sir Jonathan Evans, was given a plum job at HSBC, £125,000 for 40 days work a year. That's what's going on. It's the corruption of the revolving doors. To give you a little example, I'm not going to go into my story, but I worked for a firm of solicitors. I reported them to the Solicitors Regulation Authority. It was to do with fraud, HSBC fraud. The SRA, the Solicitors Regulation Authority, covered it up. And at that time, the head of the SRA was a guy called Anthony Townsend. Now, I've since reported it to the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority. They colluded with HSBC to cover it up. This was dealt with by the Treasury Select Committee at the last meeting with the FCA. They challenged the FCA about this cut and paste job they did. They basically, when I made this report of fraud, they asked HSBC what to say, and they cut and pasted HSBC's response and sent that to me. And HSBC lied. What HSBC actually said to them was 100% untrue, and the FCA just passed it on to me. So if I now want to make a complaint against the FCA, if I want to escalate my complaint, I have to go to the Complaints Commissioner. The Complaints Commissioner is Anthony Townsend, who was the head of the SRA when it was covered up by the SRA. So you go round and round in circles because of this revolving door with all these people at the top going to the... I mean, I think there should be a law that says that nobody can work for regulators if they've worked in the private sector previously and vice versa, because it's just corrupt all the way through.
Craig Capitas?
There's no way any bank or publicly traded institution, financial institution, or private in the world is going to allow an NGO through its doors to do a due diligence.
All right, but maybe not an NGO, but how about an independent regulator or an independent auditor in this case?
Well, look, these independent auditors exist. Look what happened in the U.S. this week. Someone brought up with Janet Yellen, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, that perhaps they should audit the Fed, which certainly needs auditing. And she just about had a heart attack while testifying in front of Congress. It is a closed shop. It really comes, and it is a smelly kettle of fish. I mean, you can smell the sulfur here in the studio. But the only way that it's going to change is through the ballot box. I have seen too many of these instances, reported on too many of these stories, from the source, from Panama, from inside Switzerland, from Hong Kong, from HSBC's old headquarters on the Bund in Shanghai. The only way this is going to change is through the ballot box.
You mentioned the ballot box. There's a general election coming up in the UK. When the story broke on February 10th, the opposition seized on the nomination by Cameron of HSBC's former boss as a trade secretary.
Mr. Speaker, it was in the public domain in September 2010 that HSBC was enabling tax avoidance on an industrial scale. Are we seriously expected to believe that when you made Stephen Green a minister, 4 months later, he had no idea about these allegations?
Well, I'm glad he's brought up the issue of Stephen Green, who is a trade minister in this government. This is the same Stephen Green who Gordon Brown appointed as the head of his Business Advisory Council. This is the same Stephen Green who Labour welcomed as a trade minister into the government. And it's the same Stephen Green who the Shadow Business Secretary, looking a bit coy today, invited on a trade mission as late as 2013.
All right, so
that is one of the most crassly political, disingenuous statements I've ever heard. If you replay that, listen to how Miliband describes these people. He calls it tax avoidance. Well, tax avoidance is legal. Tax evasion is not. So if you are doing everything in your legal power to avoid paying taxes, there is nothing wrong with that, except perhaps ideological.
All right, let's go to our friends across the channel here. I'll begin with you, Andy Sylvester. What's going to be the political impact of all of this in this general election campaign situation that we're in?
Absolutely, we are 3 months away, and there will be an impact of this. The last couple of weeks have seen the newspapers packed with stories. The Conservatives have been caught up in it because of the Stephen Green issue, but also because some of their donors, which again is transparent and open, have also been caught up in sort of various tax avoidance schemes. I think Craig is exactly right that the tenor of debate here is moving away from these kind of witch hunts. I don't think they're very popular anymore, frankly. And I think people are now keying onto the fact that politicians aren't fixing the system they have the power to fix. On a sort of wider political narrative, it doesn't suit the Conservatives well to be associated with this. They still have problems appealing to certain sectors of the population that look at tax avoidance and think, why don't I get a chance to do that? You know, I pay every month in my tax code and I don't earn enough to get accountants. From Labour's perspective, the Conservatives have done an exceptionally good job of turning fire on them because, of course, the allegations that Hervé's brought to light, and thank goodness he has, and I'd echo calls for stronger whistleblower protection, they happened under Labour's watch in Westminster. So, frankly, it's been quite an unedifying scene the last couple of weeks, and it's only destroyed even more trust in Westminster, which was already struggling for its reputation.
Nicholas Wilson?
I'd like to tell you something about Stephen Green, and I think, if I may be so bold, when my story comes out, which it will in the next few weeks, this little snippet of information might bring Cameron down before the election.
Oh, you're whetting our appetite here.
Well, in connection with the thing I've been dealing with, this fraud thing, the Office of Fair Trading made an order against HFC Bank, which is a subsidiary of HSBC Bank, telling them to stop doing what it was that I was complaining about. I won't go into that, but the order was signed on the 17th of November 2010. On the 16th of November 2010, it was announced that Cameron was making Stephen Green a lord. But the OFT order wasn't published on the 17th, it was just signed on the 17th. On the 22nd of November 2010, Stephen Green was introduced to the House of Lords. On the 22nd of November 2010, the Office of Fair Trading issued a press release, and the title of the press release was to do with charging orders. The thing I've been complaining about is something called collection charges. There was nothing in the press release about collection charges. Right at the bottom of the press release was a PDF attachment which contained the order that was made against HSBC Bank, and it was nobody picked it up. None of the media picked it up. I picked it up because I'm researching it. Nobody knows about it. So what happened was Cameron said, I'm going to make Green a lord. Has anybody got any dirt on HSBC that's going to embarrass me? Found out about this OFT order and got it buried.
And what's going to be
my website.
What's going to be Nicholas Wilson? What's going to be the impact on the general election?
Well, as I say, if this comes out and if it's picked up in the way I believe it should be, because everybody's saying, I mean, I'm coming to answer your question. I mean, everybody's saying Cameron knew about this tax thing before he made Green a lord. Well, I think this will just be the nail in the coffin. And I honestly think Cameron will have to go before May. But if he doesn't, I think there's no possibility that he will get in again. Well, I hope so.
Craig Capitas.
If I may, can I tell you how this all started? It goes back to 1927.
You're going back far here.
If you want to understand why the fish in this barrel smells so bad, you need to know the history here. In fact, I would suggest there's really no other story we're seeing here out right now and where you need to understand the history. It goes back to 1927, to Panama. A few years before, the United States instituted income tax. And the people who worked on the Panama Canal were fed up with having to pay tax to the United States when they lived somewhere else. So they went to the Panamanian government, and the Panamanian government enacted what was known as Law 32, which is still on the books. Law 32, in simple terms, allowed any foreigner to start a company down there based on the Delaware corporate model. Now, this, when I was last in Panama, was one of the country's biggest earners. In fact, it contributed more to GDP than the Panama Canal revenues. They got in trouble. And this was where there was an opportunity to change the system. They got into the trouble in the late 80s with Noriega, because Noriega was bringing in a lot of narco dollars to filter through the system, and the legitimate money ran out. They left. They went to other tax domiciles. When Noriega left, all that money came back in, and all the big banks. Now, right now, there's over 130 offshore banks in Panama. It employs over 15,000 jobs, I believe, like in Luxembourg and other offshore centers. This is what this country has to offer. This is how they make money. And the most important question to me for Hervé is if he, on that list that he has, if he knows where these alleged tax avoiders or dodgers are actually domiciled. I would be surprised if that list actually stated whether these individuals were paying their legitimate taxes in the jurisdictions where they are required to. That's the first question that's going to be asked in any legal proceeding.
Hervé Falciani?
Yes, just to answer that, a lot of more information are available on who was detaining what legal structure, where, of course, this structure was domiciliate and where the beneficiaries were declaring their tax residency. So All this is available, and one of of the important aspect of the subject I would like to highlight is that you have no efficient legal cooperation at the level of Europe. And of course, this is also right locally in Great Britain or in France, when some departments are in charge of part of one aspect of one investigation, they with with a lot of difficulty, they can collaborate when they can collaborate with other departments
and
to
do you
say.
think, Hervé Falciani, let me ask you, do you think as that with this being brought to light, there's going to be a bigger push now for tax harmonization between states?
I'm not sure this is possible. In a practical way, I really don't think it's possible to manage it globally. Public awareness, once more, it may be difficult to organize a way for NGO, for really independent authority to have access to what is ongoing inside the companies. What the story is telling us is that without insiders, you don't exactly know what must be changed, what is ongoing. So to me, it's not that complex. It seems so simple that we don't want to stop on it. But this is enough. It's about history, impunity, from Platon in his book, second book of Republica, speaking about the myth of Gizes, is the same. Just help insider in a protected way, share the valuable information they may offer to understand clearly what is important to change. And even board of director won't let things going in an unethical way.
All right, so
because, of course, of public awareness.
Plato gets the last word. Hervé Falciani, I want to thank you for joining us today. Hervé Falciani, the whistleblower in the Swissleaks scandal, joining us from an undisclosed location. Andy Sylvester of the Taxpayers Alliance in London, I want to thank as well. Nicholas Wilson for being with us from Hastings. Nicholas, I hope you will check in with us when you have more on your own personal tale. And Craig Capitas for being with us here in the studio. Stay with us, because our Media Watch segment is next. All right, we did get complaints on social media when the day began. Why aren't we talking about Charlie Hebdo hitting the stands again in the debate? Fortunately, James Creedon is here with us.
Right. Well, I think we've been talking about it a lot throughout the week, because already the front cover, we knew what it was going to look like as early as Monday. So
second edition, right?
Second edition since the attacks. There was that first edition since the attacks that was rushed out as sort of a survivor's issue, as it has been called in some of the media. But this is the first, I suppose, proper issue since the attacks. They took a few weeks break, Francois. C'est réparti is the front cover headline, which means back to business, I suppose, or off we go
back
again.
Yeah.
And you can see a sort of a pack of what has been described by some media as rabid dogs. Marine Le Pen in the form of a bulldog, Nicolas Sarkozy in the form of a poodle. You've got a bishop in there. You've got an Islamist. You've got... And Charlie Hebdo sort of being pursued by the lot of them. In other words, we're back to our sort of confrontational attitude when it comes to to everybody, really, right? So now some people have criticised it for being a little bit difficult to decipher, but I think it's relatively clear. Some of the cartoons on the inside, we don't want any more trouble. You could politely.
That's the G-rated version.
That's exactly. We don't want any more bleep. And special edition lolcats. Now that's Luz, who is one of the famous cartoonists, right. And I think that's it's a sort of a funny take on the fact that their provocative style has, of course, been vastly criticised.
And it's a bit of a trouble, because here we have a paper that was made up of outsiders to the system, and now they're basking in the glory. It's a little bit difficult for them.
That's right. Just to speak about that, there's a lot to say in it, but 2.5 million copies of this edition sold. I mean, this is completely, it's unheard of for the magazine. It used to sell in the dozens of thousands. What was it? Something like 40,000. A lot of people say now that they're really going to have to rethink their business plan. There are apparently even divisions within the company over how to handle all of this money. They've even sought the advice of Anne Hummel, who was the communications advisor to Dominique Strauss-Kahn. So some saying for an anti-establishment weekly to be seeking the advice of Dominique Strauss-Kahn's former communications advisor, it shows that really things have changed for Charlie Hebdo.
It'll be a tricky transition for them.
Indeed. James
Creedon, I want to thank you. Thank you for being with us here. I want to thank once again our panel for being with us in the France 24 debate.